Welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. And today we are talking drop pods, one of my favorite topics because I love the drop pod army. So, as you may have noticed, we have some new rules for the drop pod. So we're going to go over those real quick and talk about the different things that I think about them, whether or not this is something that was going to be useful for us. Keep in mind, we do have a supplement coming, so some of this will change based on what our rules are in that, but it's a good overview whether or not I think they're going to be okay and useful for us. Lots of discussion today, but I just got off of work, so now you're going to see the video, and hopefully this will be posted up in the next couple days. All right, so let's kind of take a look at this. So, Drop Pod has zero movement. It is seven toughness, three save, eight wounds, six plus leadership, and critically zero OC. So, special rules has Deadly Demise 1, Deep Strike, Oath of Moment. Note that Oath of Moment is kind of uh, redundant here because it doesn't have any weapons, which is a change from the old data sheet. It also has drop pod assault special rule. This model must start the battle in reserves and can be set up in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase, regardless of any mission rules. Any units embarked within this model must immediately disembark after it has been set up on the battlefield, and they must be set up more than 9 inches away from all enemy models. There is also the combat disembarkation rule. Each time a unit disembarks from this model after it has been set up on the battlefield, that unit is still eligible to declare a charge this turn. This is different from the previous edition as well. And finally, we have the ability deployment complete. Once this unit is set up on the battlefield and all units within it have disembarked, until the end of the battle, units cannot embark in this transport. It is now a dedicated transport, so you can have as many as you have a unit to put them in. And Note has a dedicated transport. You do have to deploy something in it at the start of the battle. Notably, however, you will see in the drop pod assault, it does take away the rules that were previously there, saying that the units inside do not count towards strategic reserves or reserves. So, unfortunately, Games Workshop rained on my parade and having an all drop pod army. So, unfortunately, you can still only have up to 1,000 points of this, and then you're gonna also it's only half of your army, so you're gonna have to make sure that you have appropriate amounts of units for that. And 1,000 points, you're maybe gonna get 6 drop pods into that with units, probably closer to 5, depending on what it is. Um, but you're not gonna have a full drop pod list, so that's unfortunate. But there's lots of cool things that you can do with this. So transport ability. You have 12 Adeptus Astartes infantry models cannot transport Centurion, Gravis, Jump Pack, Wolfen, or Terminator models. So there's that. There's also a designer's note that is on this page. Alex will probably put this on the screen for you because when he edits this, that'll note that everything that's in the red is the only parts that are considered to make up the whole. Basically, in the new model, there's the all of those rocks and doors that are there. For all intents and purposes, they don't exist. They're decorative. With that being said, you do have to deploy it. They do have to be able to lay flat on the board. And in some maps, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do that. So I don't play on WTC boards, but I have been told that they're fairly tight, much tighter than Games Workshop standard terrain setups. So you may not be able to use drop pods in WTC because this new model does not have the ability to have those flaps taped up. It's actually molded to the bottom, so there's no way to do that. The actual drop pod is molded that way. Um, However, with that being said, We'll pop up a video or a picture of the comparison. I believe it was from Goonhammer, so credit where credit's due there. But there's a picture of what they look like, and significantly smaller than the footprint of the old drop pod with the flaps down. So that's important to note here. So it takes up less space, and the hull part of the drop pod itself is very similar in size. So, and they don't say anything in the commentary that you can't use the old drop pod. So, in many of us had drop pods that were glued up. Excuse me, there. We glued up the doors. So I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use those if you have the old ones rather than the new ones. Um, but just make sure that you're not trying to get block line of sight on shooting that would shoot through it, because that's really kind of sketch. So, okay. So, all of that out of the way, are they good? Okay, so I think there's pros and cons to this. I'm uh, cautiously optimistic that this might be something that would be worthwhile for us in the list. So, talked about the footprint. It is going to be a little bit more difficult to put them on the board as a part of that. So you have to be strategic with where you put them. You do have the ability to come in on turn one for an alpha strike. A lot of people are talking about the ability to get these things in, put units in there, and charge out, Primaris, Sword Brethren, tooled up lists. Oh man, all the things that you can do. Okay, back up, back up, because we don't want to do that. The reason is you only have about a 28% chance of making a charge out of 9 inches. So, not good. 28% is not going to win the day. And guess what's going to happen when you fail that charge? You're right there in the open for a counter charge, or more likely getting shot and then charged, and that unit's going to die. More importantly, your opponent is going to screen important units. So, those dangerous uh, close combat units that you're putting up there to drop in to make those supposed charges that you're got only a 28% chance of doing, they're going to be screened. You're going to have to charge something stupid, and then you're not going to be able to get into combat again. Or if you do consolidate into a new combat, you're going to just get hit with whatever it is that you consolidated into after you killed that first screen unit. Not ideal. However, if you take a step back and you think about what you're trying to do with the drop pod, I think you can do stuff. First of all, tricks to help with your deployment. So I think it's important to note that drop pods potentially can be a hard counter to units that are very aggressive and want to push up the board. The reason is they can't move it within 1 inches of you without having to charge and destroy it, or they have to blow it up and then you can move through it on a different turn. Or if they blow it up first turn, then they can go um, through it on their side of the turn if they have the bottom half, that type of stuff. But there's nothing saying that you have to come down on the first turn. That's just an option for you. So you can drop into on Games Workshop terrain, just the way it's set up in the ruins. You can drop into the footprint of the ruin with your drop pod, and then get out of the drop pod and put yourself just under an inch away from the wall so that your opponent can't charge through the wall to get you. So you make sure you're outside of 1 inch from the outside of the wall. So you're not in engagement range. And you're going to create a magic box. From that location, you can attempt your charges to your opponent if you are within 9 inches or somewhere like that. So that may be an option for you to do to save yourself, depending on how your opponent deployed. Now, a good opponent's not going to stage up their army to where you can get an easy charge after being able to drop into a ruin, but it's something that if it happens, it's something that you can possibly do. But the other thing is you can tool up your units with guns. Now, Bob, we're the Black Templars. Why are you talking about guns? Right? Because let's be honest, guns are more effective. You're going to be having Alpha Strike. You're going to get clear shots to whatever you need. Screening units don't matter, so you can shoot them. Put something dangerous in there, something that will be able to do some damage, and we'll be able to do something. So things that come to mind is Infernus units. Infernus is not something that we're typically taking because we don't want to walk them, right? You can do 5 man, 10 man if you want. I probably would go smaller, and I'll talk about why in just a few minutes. But Infernus units, you drop them in, you don't have to worry about the hit rolls. You're just going to flame them. And then because you're flaming them, you're going to have to force a battle shock. So guess what? Chances are that they're going to have a battle shock there and potentially miss that. Then they can't use any, or they're not going to be able to claim any objectives with that unit. You know how battle shock works. I don't need to explain it, but the potential to fail a battle shock right on turn one is kind of hilariously fun. Plus, if it's a chaff unit that they put in front of it, you're probably going to do a significant amount of damage to that particular unit with the Infernus. You can also do something like Stern Guard. Now, Stern Guard are something I would be a little bit more concerned about with because right now they're good with Oath of Moment, but there is rumors that we might see some changes to rules. So that one's kind of a but right now it's a good take. So Stern Guard do shooting well. They also have the ability to take a power fist, and they don't have terrible amounts of attacks because they are veterans. They're just basic close combat weapons, but they're not terrible. You get a power fist, so I guess it's something. So another thing, if you're not taking guns, but you do have the ability to do it, is Primaris Crusader squads. So why would you take those? Well, they're 150 points. You get 10 guys. I wouldn't put anything with them, but they have innate reroll advances and charges. So you go from a 28% to make your charge to it's approximately 47%, I believe, 48, close in there, somewhere around there to make that charge. So it becomes a coin flip, which is not the worst thing, but it also is beneficial for you in other ways. So, what are those other ways? I kind of alluded to that a little bit. So, all right, if you again take a step back and think about what you're using the drop pod for. Most people are really like, I want to just kill stuff. I want to kill stuff. I don't think that's how you need to effectively use a drop pod. Drop pods in the past and nowadays, I think, are best used to manipulate the board. What do I mean by that? Use them for move blocking. Force your opponent to react to your game plan by putting units that are basically going to dam up their deployment. So if they screen from you, you don't mind that because it's going to block up their deployment. If you wait to drop them in, your opponent's going to be able to spread through the board and this won't work. You're obviously not going to be able to do that because they cannot move through your unit. They cannot move through your drop pod. So they're going to either have to move through the ruins or other go around them, which is going to slow them down. Those ultra aggressive units, their armies that you're going to face, world eaters come to mind. There's orcs, there's tyranids, there's a ton of different armies out there that want to move forward really quickly that don't have the ability to fly directly over you or move through ruins if they're vehicle heavy, that this would severely dampen their ability. So you want to basically deploy as close as you can to them in strategic choke points, drop in, get your unit that comes out of it in a location that is not going to just get them evaporated if you can. Shoot, then if you can make a charge, then you can make a charge. Great. That's where I say get some guns into your list. grav devs or something that you can do in the right list. Um, if they can get some AP bonuses, like the Vanguard detachment has, but their devastators with multi meltas are good. A bunch of different things that are good that you can drop in. And then if you just charge them in, that's not the worst thing in the world. You just want to make sure that you keep them cheap because these are sacrificial units that you're putting in there. So really, you could put anything in there that's cheap and dirt cheap, right? So it happens at the beginning of your move phase. So just keep in mind that uh, because of that, if you do something like intercessors, you're going to have to wait a whole nother turn before they get sticky if you drop them on an objective. So it doesn't really work. So, but there's other things, assault intercessors, things that you can drop in that are they're going to be cheap that are applicable to what you want to do with this. So block up your opponent with your drop pods because then you force them to have to kill that drop pod, which has OC0, costs 70 points, which is a little bit more expensive. I would like to have had a little bit cheaper with no weapon on it, but I mean, it is what it is. You block up your opponent, they're forced to go around, and if they have something like knights, they're going to run through those ruins, but they still have to account for going around and shooting those if they want to go through directly to an objective. So you can control the pace of the primary missions and the secondary missions depending on the army that you're facing. Now, if you're facing something like Eldar or Drukari or a fast army like that, they don't care if you have drop pods. They can deal with that and okay, they can move around you, not a big deal. But there is some armies that is very beneficial to do this. Okay, so what else do we got? Um, Things that are going to be kind of important. Another unit that's kind of meme that other person or another person brought up is you can put Tech Marine in the drop pod itself. And once the drop pod dies or another unit that's a vehicle that's close by, they call it Super Saiyan Tech Marine because the special rules, it gets extra bonuses once a vehicle dies near it because it does have lone op. So you can hide it behind the drop pod until it gets close. So that's something that's kind of funny. But one thing I would do as well is I would combo your drop pods with an infiltration unit of some sort. Doesn't necessarily have to be infiltrators, but like scouts or something like that, because you want to screen the rest of your board. Um, and specifically, you want to have them deploy forward so that your opponent doesn't do the same against you with their scout moves or something of that. So that those drop pods are forced backwards towards the middle of the board or something even closer to your deployment zone because that would really invalidate the use of the drop pod itself and then you really aren't going to get your value out of it. So kind of wrap this back around. I know I don't want to be too long on this video. So pros and cons. Cons, they're going to be a little bit difficult to deploy because of the maps, the size, due to having the fins down, you're going to have to deal with that and things of that nature. So they're hard to do. Their points are a little heavy at 70 points, so you're going to have to account for that on top of the differing units that you're going to decide to put in them. Another con is it's only a 28% chance of charging out of that drop pod, even though that is a very exciting rule. Going back to the old rules of being able to do that, but we haven't been able to do it in a couple of editions. But 28% is not great. So you have to have something that has innate rerolls on it. Primaris Crusader Squad, I'm looking at you. So that's something that we will be able to reroll our charges, and then you're getting close to a 50%. I think 47.8 or something like that, I think is what the math comes down to. Chance with rerolls to make a 9-inch charge. So keep them cheap, 150, possibly get the charge. And if they don't make it, then okay, well, they're going to die. Um, so that's kind of the cons for that, right? The other thing is if they are fast, your opponent, or they push you forward, like you don't have any infiltration units, or they scout you up, or they have their own infiltration units, and they get you to have to get pushed back, then they're going to control the board. It's not going to work. So you have to think about that. That's why I would recommend not taking more than two or three in your list for that reason. But the pros are kind of the inverse. If you are able to aggressively deploy your draw pods, get them down on first turn, block your opponent in, then they have to deal with you. Not only do they have to deal with the fact that you have units in their next to their deployment zone, essentially, they're going to have to work their movement phase much more carefully. So whether you're overwatching with Infernus or charging in, your whole goal is to dam your opponents in like water, right? You don't want them to get out. So with only two or three drop pods, you're not going to do that very well, but at least you can focus your opponent to go one way or the other. So it is a manipulation game. It is not a kill your opponent game that you're playing with drop pods. Is it viable? Is it going to be something that's competitive? Remains to be seen, but I do believe it's something that's worth checking out. And in the past, it has done very well. There's some very good players that have been able to make them work in the past. Once upon a time in fifth edition, when we had the similar rules, I was able to do the same thing with this. So I'm very excited to play this. It's something that I've wanted a really long time for our Black Templars to be able to do. And it was kind of funny that when I was talking in the Discord with several of you yesterday about this, then they dropped the rules the next day. So it was kind of funny on that. But that's what I kind of think about our drop pods. I think there is definitely some usage here. I'm looking at probably doing some Stern Guard and maybe some Primaris Crusader squads in a list to do, as I said, get those things up forward, put some pressure on your opponent, even if they fail those charges and you got some shots going to your opponent, that it's going to manipulate their board, force them to do some things that they don't want to do, and move forward with the game where you are able to dictate the flow of the game, hopefully, and do something with that. So I'm going to get to testing with these guys. I do have some drop pods, and I'm looking forward to giving you some of the results on the Discord. Until next time, you have a great night.